Web3/parity team. It's always great to talk about and see like the different ecosystems forming around the world, really. We pulled this graphic from an artist online, so you can, if you like it, I can find the attribution and I'll send it over to you. And so yeah, as the title said, and I just introduced, Edgeware is one of the projects we're running at Commonwealth Labs. Commonwealth is focused on governance. That's multi-chain, but our first project is really within the Polkadot ecosystem, specifically Edgeware. And as Antoine so graciously mentioned before, we are working with them and the rest of the Polkadot ecosystem. Chen guys, it's great to hear that you guys are working on a generalized bridge. We are very excited about that, especially as you support WASM chains. That'll be very, very exciting. And that just goes to show what Jack said earlier. There's 30 teams around the world working on related projects, and yeah, I think it's good. And it's hard to keep track. It's a growing ecosystem, and I think it'll only continue to grow as we kind of get closer and closer to launch. And so, what is Edgeware besides what you've heard a little bit before? You can see there's a little E here. So originally, this is the first result on Google or DuckDuckGo if you use that privacy-enabled browser. So Edgeware is like a little town in London. This is the first result. We're on the main page now, so the Edgeware awareness is growing. But if you come and search Edgeware, we will be able to spread the word a little bit farther. But for our purposes, Edgeware is a few things. But one statement, to put it plainly, it's a Polkadot generalized smart contract platform. And it has a few features, and I'll run through those today. It's dev-friendly, so that means enabling WASM smart contracts, or compiling down to WASM, having a modular tool stack so you can actually build modules and enhance the Edgeware chain itself, a clear roadmap for governance enabled by on-chain voting. And to kind of bootstrap that effect, we have this new token distribution mechanism called the lock drop, which I'll delve into a little further. And again, to keep seeding this network, we want to continue circulating tokens, not just to validators who will initially verify transactions, but also to other developers who will build core technology for the platform, as well as build new dApps or things like that. So we want to incentivize them with a community-governed block reward. And finally, the first word in kind of the one-sentence pitch for Edgeware is a Polkadot smart contract platform. So Edgeware will be launched, quote-unquote, as a solo chain, but it will, one day when Polkadot launches later this year, it will have the guaranteed security, as well as the inter-blockchain messaging capabilities from Polkadot. And so without further ado, I'll delve into the dev-friendly part. So how many developers are actually in the room? I'm just curious. Okay, all right, so if I say, I'm not gonna sound so dumb if I talk about WASM. So I got an econ degree, and I'm just a hacker on the side, but so if we talk about WASM, it's short for Web Assembly. And essentially what that allows us to do is, instead of writing smart contracts in Solidity or something like that, we can write them in Rust or anything that compiles down to essentially the WASM virtual machine. So that's things like Rust, JavaScript, C, C++, anything in which you kind of have a client. So you don't have to learn a new language. And one of the focuses that we've seen coming from college environment in the US is that languages are still kind of a barrier to entry. They're more a tool for thought, and so any way we can lower that barrier is easier. So coming from, again, Penn, there was a lot of kids that still knew kind of what blockchain were, but kind of the barrier to entry, even messing around with Solidity or messing around with opcodes if you're programming with Bitcoin, was enough to kind of stop them. So building in Rust or these other languages that people are actually taught in goes a long way to helping make the ecosystem a lot more friendly. And beyond just enabling easier build-outs of smart contracts, what we get from Substrate is a modular and extensible ecosystem. So instead of having to build a new sidechain with a new consensus layer or forking Geth, as the chains that guys mentioned before, all we had to do is plug in a specific module. The things that we added, which I'll get to a little further on in the talk, are a thin identity component, some tools around signaling, on-chain signaling, so those are non-binding votes, and things like that. And so these are different modules that will be able to be used by other Substrate parachains. And so that's one way we kind of hope to help further the ecosystem. And from the underlying technology, instead of having to build out from the networking layer up, we didn't have to mess around with P2P or anything else, and we could really just focus on the things that we feel like make a compelling smart contract platform or blockchain in general, and that's governance, if you haven't already guessed. And from the modular, this is essentially what we have, we're building out in from Substrate. So here's the Substrate layer. Here is on the dev side, the tooling environment that we kind of inherit. And to make it even more easy, we essentially are already talking with Zeppelin, as well as other folks that are bringing their suite of tools over from the Ethereum ecosystem to help make and use all the tools that we're already familiar with. So whether that be Safe Math or any of the other libraries, we can use those right away as they can hopefully compile down to WASM. And so on the Edgeware side, again, as we talked about before, identity that will ideally be able to hook into the speckle stack, different voting mechanisms for non-binding or binding votes, votes that should affect the treasury to fund further developments of the network. And from this, different DAOs or different organizations and groups of people can start to interact on the platform and build out more tools. Yay. So that's kind of leg one of Edgeware. And so if you might ask, this is hopefully really attractive to developers, different investors, or anyone who wants to participate in this new governance process, but how do I actually get tokens? And so Edgeware is being launched, not with an ICO, but with something we're calling the lock drop. And we're doing this because we think we can actually incentivize a better participating, more actively participating set of users who hold the token. And so what is the lock drop? So essentially what we're doing is giving away 90% of the Edgeware tokens to anyone who holds Ethereum, and all you have to do is time lock your ETH to get that edge. And we hopefully would like to have everyone in this room participate. It doesn't matter if you have 1 ETH or 1 million. If anyone has 1 million ETH in this room, please come see me after the talk. But hopefully we're being anonymous, you know. And so we want everyone to participate because it is an open ecosystem, and blockchains need not just core developers, but application developers. Ecosystems need individual users, as well as people who can guarantee the economic security of the network. So there are multiple actors, and we need all of them to flourish. And so this lock drop, we're actually already getting the contracts. We actually just got our initial audit report back. Everything came back safe. Woohoo. So we'll be able to publish those results very, very soon. But what the lock drop is essentially the way, again, that you can get Edgeware tokens. And that happens in 2 ways, a lock, a drop, a lock, and a signal. And so a lock is when you time lock your Ethereum. So that's for 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And you get a corresponding bonus in Edgeware tokens for time locking for a longer amount of time. You're putting more of your opportunity cost online, you're putting more skin in the game. So you're entitled to more tokens right upon network launch. But if you aren't able to actually lock your tokens, you can actually signal. Essentially what happens is you don't have to lock for any amount of time. You just sign a carbon vote style transaction from your wallet. Your balance, we can see your balance when we're spinning up the Genesis config for the new chain. And essentially, you'll get your tokens 12 months after network launch. Right? So that's the penalty, so to speak, for not being able to lock your tokens. And also there's this kind of deduction that happens 12 months down the line. But again, we want to open up participation to everyone who wants to join in this kind of new experiment to run a chain. And so we want to be as wide and as open as possible. And this means ecosystems as well, right? So we're based all across the globe. We'd like to spend time in Asia as well, and help further the mission. And again, as I talked about before, so if you're a core network developer, if you get Edgeware tokens, you can start to experiment and upgrade the chain itself, hopefully in a manner that's more transparent. I don't want to throw shade. We love the Ethereum ecosystem. Obviously, it's kind of being launched as a side chain to the Ethereum ecosystem, but if we're able to more transparently vote around specific issues, we might be able to upgrade faster. And so we can test those changes on Edgeware. And if you hold Edgeware tokens as a validator or a staker, you can delegate to someone if you can't actually run your own proof of stake node. Or you can essentially actually run a node, right? And so we're doing this in DigitalOcean. People, I can't pull up my laptop, but we have a working testnet up right now. You can go to our GitHub repos, and you can already start validating. We can give you some testnet tokens from our faucet, or you can just ping us in Discord is actually the real answer. We don't have a faucet yet. And you can start finalizing and minting blocks. And so when the Edgeware network launches, you'll be able to claim your Edgeware tokens and validate right away. And if you're a governance developer, again, we're largely focused on governance at Commonwealth Labs. And so the things that we want to do to build out to further governance are things like anonymous voting, different DAOs, things that, and different DAOs there's so many different variations of how organizations can be run, right? There can be cash flow DAOs, there could be grant giving DAOs, all different ways of organizing people, all different ways of incentives that we hope to be able to test within the Edgeware ecosystem. And of course, if you're a decentralized app developer, you can get Edgeware tokens and pay the transaction fees that are associated with a generalized smart contract platform. And you can deploy your apps or dApps on Polkadot within the Polkadot ecosystem without having to spin up your own parachain if you don't have too many dots yet. And so we're talking with a few teams already to do that from the Ethereum ecosystem. Again, I think this goes to show that Polkadot is just an ecosystem that is trying to kind of like create a non-zero-sum game is something that people don't really think about. And so that's the second leg. And so now that everyone has tokens, now that all kind of stakeholders are represented, the passive stakers and investors who are guaranteeing the economic security of the proof of stake chain, the developers, different governance experimenters, now they can all fight over, hopefully not fight over, but hopefully get to choose who, rightly so, gets the block reward. And so I mentioned this a little bit before, but a proof of stake chain, normally the block reward goes to just validators or people who are validating transactions. And so they're incentivized with a mixture of fees as well as this block reward. And so on Edgeware, 50% of this block reward will go to a DAO. And the DAO will hopefully be governed in the 3 rings of governance. So don't get too dizzy when I point this laser pointer. So the things that we're building out are the signaling layer. So that's non-binding votes. So if you hold an Edgeware token, if you're an investor, a staker, or whatever else, everyone will kind of see, so you can send a proposal. Say you want to fund Speckle, essentially, the development there. So everyone will be able to vote on that in a non-binding manner. And if that kind of gets enough informal support, you can move to democracy vote. And so within the democracy module, what you can do is essentially a token-weighted vote to actually implement and give away the Edgeware tokens to a deserving developer. Another function of the democracy module is beyond allocating treasury rewards, is also to vote people onto the council, essentially. And what is this council? This council is a set of people who essentially bias the quorum or make it easier or harder for the rest of the ecosystem to essentially vote or enact a proposal. And why is there a council? It's kind of counterintuitive. Actually, sorry. I mixed up the slides a little bit. And so as I talked about before, there's 50% of the block reward goes to this treasury. We want to provide incentives to all sets of ecosystem participants instead of just validators. It should work like a DAO. Again, anyone can participate. Anyone who holds Edgeware tokens can participate and vote. And we really want to encourage that. We want to encourage that through our Edgeware specific governance UI. These are actually old, and you'll be able to, if you sign up on Edgeware, there's a link at the end of this presentation, but you can sign up, you can start participating in governance proposals that will happen on the testnet. So early participants in this testnet will get some Edgeware tokens when mainnet launches, so we want to incentivize participation. And so the kind of features that you can see here, it's a very GitHub-like interface. You can vote, yes or no. You can see, you can create comments, yada, yada, yada. Here's a close-up of a specific proposal. You can see who's voted, all the things that we should know and love for governance. This is what I was trying to get at before. So for councils, and then governance in particular, the one worry that we all have is who gets to vote and who really holds power within these ecosystems. And so in the traditional manner, if you are in a network that's purely token weighted and is also restricted to only the set of validators who are verifying transactions, you can get a scenario where only a few people, perhaps in the case like US, you only have like 21 block producers actually making a decision on the network. And that may lead to bad outcomes down the line. We're very early in the life cycle of crypto governance, and so we really haven't seen the effects of how these things play out. But one of the core goals on Edgeware are to provide a set of governance primitives to hopefully guard against that governance lock-in, that regulatory or governance capture by large token holders. And so the ways we want to do that beyond having normal token weighted voting, having this council who hopefully should represent the values and hopes and dreams of all the stakeholders within the network, is a concept called lock duration voting. And so what it is, it kind of follows from the lock drop itself. So you can lock your tokens for 3, 6, 12 months in the lock drop. Within a voting period, you can lock your tokens for 2, 6, or 8 weeks. 2, 4, or 6 weeks. And you'll get a corresponding bonus in the weight of your token. So you can, by the amount of token that you have, if you have 1 token and you lock for 6 weeks, you'll get like a 3 times multiplier. So you have 3 tokens worth of voting. And again, this council serves the purpose of biasing the quorum. So the amount of people that actually need to show up to actually get a proposal into action, as well as defining as well as having a set limit for actually the supermajority that actually needs to approve a proposal. So if the council, who hopefully should be elected by other people, by all the token holders, says that yes, this is a really good proposal, not everyone needs to really participate, you'll need a lower supermajority to actually vote. But if one person on the council vetoes, that means that the bias will be set a little lower, you'll need more of a supermajority to actually do this. So one thing that actually happens is as the number of people who are voting increases and reaches 100%, then it just becomes a majority. One thing in crypto governance in general, as Antoine so validly pointed out, we have very, very low governance participation overall. So in different democratic states around the world, and the US is not a very good example. We only have voter participation of around 50%, right? But some other places, most other places have voting age participation of 70 to 80%. And so that's something that we'd like to hopefully achieve on Edgeware. And the last way we're hoping to prevent plutocracy or capture by large token holders in the governance process is this concept of identity, right? And so how are we actually implementing identity? What we're doing is just having you link your Edgeware address to a Twitter handle or GitHub handle, right? So we feel like those are the things that actually matter within a crypto context. And further on, you can expand this to Telegram handles, email addresses, you name it. You don't actually have to put your email in plain text, obviously. It can be an encrypted thing as well. And so that was how we hope to enable and further governance, as well as have a community governance block reward. And so here's this last part, scalability from Polkadot. That was a mouthful. So initially, Edgeware will be launched essentially as a solo chain, or in other terms, kind of like a side chain to Ethereum holders. Basically, you lock your tokens, you'll get Edgeware tokens, you'll also get your Ethereum back. When Polkadot comes online, we hope to be one of the first parachains. And so what will happen then, the use of Edgeware tokens will change. Instead of providing and staking Edgeware tokens and validating and earning rewards with Edgeware tokens, as well as paying for gas and account storage, what will happen is Polkadots essentially will be given to the set of validators that are within the Polkadot ecosystem, right, instead of Edgeware tokens. And so Edgeware tokens will just be used for gas, account storage, and governance, of course. There's a future. I know this is further down the road for Polkadot / the Parity team and other teams implementing the Polkadot protocol, is the ability for different parachains to become relay chains. And so there's a world in which Edgeware again will be used as a validating and staking token, but that will be a little bit further in the future. And so again, why build on Edgeware? If we already have this kind of heterogeneous blockchain world enabled by Polkadot, then what place does Edgeware serve? So as we talked about before, different chains have different trade-offs, every chain. There are so many technical decisions that go into implementing something, and the things that we still love from Ethereum are the fact that you can build permissionless and composable smart contracts. I remember attending hackathons and hooking together a bunch of APIs. And one of my proudest achievements was building a camera application where you could take a picture of a math problem and solve it for you, using Wolfram Alpha. But now on the DeFi ecosystem, you can build an index for the S&P 500 and have it be trading in liquid, right? That's just the scalability that you get from composable smart contracts, and that only takes a weekend to build as well, right? And so we want to maintain this composable future as well. So if you still want the guaranteed security from Polkadot, but you want to experiment within that permissionless environment, then you can come and build on Edgeware. And it hopefully should be a nice and cozy dev environment as well. That kind of covers everything here. And so again, more information on the lock drop. So it's happening June 1st, 2019 to June 15th. So a 2-week period in which you can come to the Commonwealth or the Edgeware website. You can hook in MetaMask, Ledger, you name it, and then participate in this lock drop. Here's more information. You can go to our website, you can sign up for our mailing list, you can spin up a node, just go to our website, there's a link to our GitHub. We have a Docker file, we have everything that you need to spin up a node. You can see us on Polkadot telemetry. I think this is a super informal ranking, but we're number 3. We have like 13 nodes running right now. And you can follow us on Twitter, edgeware.com. We're localizing all of our content right now, so we can have it in English, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese as well. So we are looking for proofreaders as well. If we need a lot of help. These are open source projects. So thank you so much again, Erica. Thank you for having me, and I'll take any questions.
speculation behind the lockdown, right? You said I have more skin in the game if you lock for more time. Or why?
Why more skin in the game if you lock for longer?
Like you lock it deeper, which has some people who don't really want to spread it as much as you can, so again. In terms of what utility you bring and what really outcome of the skin in the game concept you bring to the Edgeware ecosystem. The longer you lock it, and then what?
Well, so I guess there's a few things at play. So on the Ethereum side, essentially let me repeat the question. So the question is why lock for longer, essentially?
Oh, why locking for longer equals more skin in the game?
Oh, I mean, so it's just basically the if you're a speculator or anyone, so all these chains are premised on especially if you're a proof of stake chain, the time value of your ETH, right, or whatever native token, right, and so if you're looking at kind of like a rational valuation model, when Edgeware what's an easier example? So with ETH, right, you can lend out ETH on Compound or something else for like 4 or 5%, right? And that can compound year over year, right? And so that's like something that we quote unquote have to compete with. And so if you lock up for longer, you should be compensated with more Edgeware tokens. That's kind of the kind of base logic. But I would say we're not really trying to incentivize speculators mostly. We're really trying to incentivize people who are actually wanting to participate within the ecosystem. So it's walking that fine line between what we know is rationally possible,
I got obviously the compound Dharma and Maker information from outside.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So you need to be on that market as well. But I couldn't get the link with actually what utility brings the locking with Edgeware. Basically, it's just not speculation. Right?
Just why are we doing the lock in the first place?
Well, I get all the competition,
right,
and I get I don't want speculation. But I thought that it was actually a link with the utility that you bring on the Edgeware ecosystem locking even. There is none.
No. Yeah, it's just the initial token distribution, and then we borrow kind of lock type mechanisms for voting, and then obviously you lock when you delegate from stake to someone, I'll see. Sorry,
specifically about swapping consensus mechanisms. That's very close to your project. I'll ask you. It's not that I'll ask you offline.
I'm happy to take it now.
Okay, so many people are trying to make cost-swappable consensus mechanisms. It's like 20 years of discussion. This is totally banned and totally nowhere. None of them really working.
Yeah.
Consensus by conference call, for example, consensus by Twitter. But the idea of swapping consensus mechanism, that sounds to me like that's an invitation for huge vulnerability to act on itself by opening up surfaces that you can actually swap them out. If I buy a car, I don't want the dealer to say to me, this is a great car, you have a choice of gas, air brakes, road brakes, or cable brakes, which one you want? I said, no, just do one and do it well. So, is this a case of engineers going a bit overboard because they can with some, or is it a really good idea to have swappable consensus mechanisms?
That's a really great question. So, what are the kind of the trade-offs or attack vectors that hot swappable consensus kind of open up, and how does that relate to Edgeware specifically? To borrow your car metaphor again, there are definitely car enthusiasts that want to swap out an engine, and obviously we do have the option to have these different features, right?
Engine, okay, brakes.
Okay, all right. That's fair. And I guess you're making the mental leap that brakes are kind of like finalizing blocks.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's an interesting metaphor there. So the things that I would say that relate to Edgeware specifically. consensus by consensus. The thing that really stuck out to me was consensus by conference call, right? And so we already have enough opaque processes within the world today, and so voting is something that's ostensibly worked for Korea, the U.S., all these different countries. And so hopefully we can bring that into an environment where we can do this all across the world for one specific chain. And so that's kind of one layer. The things that we can actually vote on would be a hot swap consensus. I would say that's more of a question to the future participants on Edgeware, as well as this kind of gets into the actual implementation side of like, how do you actually do that? And that's like more of a parity substrate question, I would say. Yeah, but I mean, it certainly does open up a lot of interesting governance vectors. So if you are changing your consensus, if we are going to be a parachain versus a solo chain before, are the Edgeware holders going to be economically incented? We hope so. But like, forks are always the kind of like implicit right you have in holding any kind of token. So that may happen, right? But will it kind of like have any teeth? It really comes down to like how many people decide to kind of go that way. Yeah, I mean, it opens up, it opens up emergent possibilities is something I would say.
Like a ramp for a non-benevolent dictator to implement the consensus mechanism that she thinks will keep her in power longer.
It is, hopefully with the transparent governance process, that can be lessened though, and all the other safeguards that we have. There are two, yeah.
So I'm just curious about the decision to like use Twitter or GitHub, like essentially as basis, as an additional identity component. Like you just walk through the process, because I mean that's also centralized services that it's like
That's a very good question. So why start with centralized services to kind of bootstrap off of identity, our identity off of? Well, the fact that we all are here talking about blockchains and that we don't use it to process payments or to connect on decentralized networks, I think is like just power to speak volumes on the network effects that these centralized services have. And so we come from a pretty pragmatic angle. Is like the places that people already trust, we're going to use that and start to bootstrap off there. The other kind of experiences that we had, so this is like identity it's such a blanket term, and so when Antoine talks about identity and I talk about identity, we talk about very, very similar things. So Antoine might spin up like a token to like actually be a verifier, but like what we actually do is something more like ERC 725. It's just like a set of like claims, so you can just like have those be stored on chain. That would be the other thing. And one reason that we felt like that should be something that's natively built into the chain itself is because ERC 725 was super expensive. Like we were running experiments when ETH was at $80, it's like 2x that right now. It would still cost like $3 or $4 to spin up like an ERC 725 identity. So having that natively built in seemed like a very, very important thing if you actually wanted to get adoption there. So that kind of those three reasons. Yeah.
I have one question, maybe not very popular in this audience. How do you guys want to make money?
How does the company want to make money, or how does the token? Or
the company. I mean, for you to develop the platform, you have to somehow fund the developer. So that means you need to somehow survive. And the question is, how does the operation entity?
Yeah. It's a really good question. Yeah, we all have to eat, We can't survive on free conference food for forever. So how does the company Commonwealth Labs fund itself? So we kind of have a few different business models. One, so we are taking, so to be fully transparent, we're, 90% of tokens are being given away, but 4.5 are still being allocated to Commonwealth entity. And so one, we still have a economic interest in making Edgeware work. So we hope it becomes a usable chain. The token hopefully appreciates in value, and it hopefully becomes something where we can stake and still actively participate in that kind of governance process. But in terms of Commonwealth, what we would like to do is essentially expand like governance tools that we built, essentially. So from Edgeware, we're launching these different DAOs, and hopefully we can move those and use those on other chains, right? So we find that like funding these different ecosystems is a very, very tough challenge. And so different experiments within Ethereum that we're watching very closely are Moloch DAO, Gitcoin, all these other things. And so what we would have essentially is using these different DAOs, essentially going out to the community, taking maybe a small portion of those tokens, and then having other people get voting tokens in this DAO in return for giving a contribution to it. They can obviously always withdraw, but this is taking a portion of governance tokens to kind of steward those funds, essentially. So that would be the kind of like medium-term business model of Commonwealth. I don't know if you like that or not, though.
I mean, it's kind of theoretical, I would say, in this environment, but let's see how the time.
I totally agree. Okay, well, if these last 2 weeks are any example, hopefully, or last 2 days are any example, hopefully, we can hope for a better future. Are there any more questions?